All right, we're live. Welcome everybody. Happy February 15th. Hope everyone had a wonderful Valentine's Day, and hopefully you'll be able to get out and about and enjoy some of the springtime weather for the next couple of days before it starts snowing again. So we'll see what happens with that. I want to thank all of our sponsors. Rose, do we have a slide with all of our sponsors on it? Let's go there. So we, again, as I always say, cannot do this without all of our sponsors. So we want to thank everyone again for being wonderful sponsors, and we're always looking for additional ones. So if you know anybody out there that think could benefit from having a sponsorship with IFMA, please let us know. So HL Restoration, Delta Innovative Services, Image Flooring, ServPro, CertaPro Painters of Shawnee Mission, Hallmark, RUI, Unity Village, Johnny Marshall Company, Seasonal Solutions, Stanger, Garmin, and Herman Miller. Again, thanks everyone for your participation in the KC IFMA chapter. Next on deck, Rose, we have our calendars. So please mark your calendars for upcoming events. Coffee and Connections on March 14th. We have a potential tour on the 15th, and April 1st, another Coffee and Connections. And April 7th is our planned second annual Easter egg hunt and happy hour at, this year it's Loose Park. That will be fun. So we had a great time last year. We had a little bit chilly, but decent sunny weather for it. So come on out, there's prizes and just good hanging out with your peers. And then on the 19th, we've got our monthly meeting, contractor and construction panel. So learn everything you want to know about construction projects and working with a contractor. And then of course, our annual golf outing is scheduled for June 6th at Staley Farms. Those are all the things that we have to tell you. So I'm going to turn it over right now to Josh Woods, who is going to give us an intro on our presentation today. Take it away, Josh.
Thanks, Julie. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our February program, where we're going to discuss asset management today. We have three esteemed professionals who are very well versed in all things asset management, and I think you're going to enjoy hearing from them as we go throughout the next 60 to 90 minutes. What I will say up front is, if you could please mute your phones, we will have a Q&A session at the end. And if you have questions that come up throughout the presentation, please don't hesitate to chat those in on the chat feature within the Zoom. And Rose is going to walk us through a little panel Q&A at the end of each of the three presentations. So I'm gonna lead off with introducing each of our three panel members today, and then we will kick it over to them to get started. Our first presenter today is Bob Reynolds, CFM, also a member of IFMA Kansas City chapter. Bob currently serves as a project and program manager for NVE Incorporated, for contracted O&M services supporting the General Services Administration at the Whitaker U.S. Courthouse and the Richard Boeing Federal Building. Bob has over 30 years in construction, project and operations management experience, and I think you're going to enjoy what Bob has to say today regarding his experience in asset management. Our second presenter of the morning is going to be Nathan Guffey. He's a professional engineer and a broker, currently the Vice President of Corporate Facilities and Corporate Real Estate for Hallmark Cards. Nathan has been employed with Hallmark for over 20 years in various capacities within supply chain, procurement, manufacturing, and distribution logistics. Currently, Nathan manages a team of over 100 employees that provide architectural, engineering, construction management, office and space planning, corporate real estate services, Crown Center office leasing, and facility services to Hallmark Cards. We look forward to hearing from Nathan. Our third presenter is Melissa Gray. She is currently the Director of Property Management for CBRE. She is an experienced commercial real estate advisor focused on client satisfaction, asset performance. She specializes in identifying challenges and developing solutions for increased asset value. Melissa oversees a team of dedicated property management and technical services professionals, coordinates all asset transitions, and provides guidance to achieve ownership objectives. Skilled in strategic planning, Melissa works directly with property owners to define and implement appropriate plans for each managed asset. Her focus on leasing, tenant relations, tenant improvement, and building maintenance operations allows her to anticipate client issues and find solutions to challenges. Those are our three presenters today. As you heard me introduce, I think you'll quickly recognize their level of expertise and ability to speak on this topic. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Reynolds and take it away, Bob.
Fantastic. Let's see if I can effectively share my screen here. Bear with me here and we'll get this thing started. Are we good? Excellent. Well, thanks for the nice introduction, Josh. I have been looking forward to this opportunity to roll out what I consider to be probably a first of a series of asset management discussions for future programs. As most are aware, asset management, there's a lot to it and a lot of different perspectives and viewpoints. We all work and live in different environments in the FM community, but also from our sponsors and those that aren't specifically FM, it's very applicable to those in the various industries. And kind of to kick that off, my presentation today speaks more about the journey that I have taken and experiences with asset management along a diversified path of career steps, if you would. And it shows applicability of asset management principle across multiple industries. And with that being said, I'll kind of dive back, and I hate to date myself, but I'm going back to the 80s and early 90s, where I started my career in mainframe service industry support. I worked for many years as a electronics engineer, and with that in mind, I had a ton of parts to support our various large mainframe computer accounts. One of the things that I realized very early on, there were millions and millions of dollars of assets constantly in flux, coming in, moving out to support our national customers. And very quickly, we had to bring to bear tools to address this constant influx. One of the things at the time, we used all manner of different ways, asset management programs to track our logistics flow. But, back then, I worked off of a BlackBerry, for instance, to track parts and scan parts in and out. We've advanced a long ways over the years from the 80s and early 90s with the tools to help us with our asset management quest. Early on in the 90s, I moved from a computer service position and into a ownership position of a small construction company. Once again, asset management became an imperative skill for me in managing my business venture through the capital assets that the company owned and tracking depreciation to that constant flow of materials and acquisition of materials, learning to track that constant ebb and flow, and for my accounting purposes, making sure that I had accuracy as I gauge what our inventory statuses were. I used spreadsheets. I didn't have a very robust CMMS system or asset modules computerized to use at the time. So I had, a number of spreadsheet suites that met the bill for that. But, once again, it was a small construction company business, but asset management was an imperative skill and consideration in managing that construction company. After the construction company, I moved to facility management in the early 2000s. There I realized as I walked into 10 years for local government that one of the cornerstone, I guess, activities for setting up my program for facility management was asset management, if you can imagine that. Capturing a snapshot in time of all the assets across diverse facilities. It was something that I still feel to this day that if you don't capture that which you have, how can you possibly manage it and set the cycles or set the timeline for the life cycles for everything that populates your various facilities. Now, granted, in my first tenure in local government, I didn't have an enormous amount of square footage to be concerned about, but I did have an enormous amount of diversity in the portfolio that we managed. So different construction dates, different construction timelines, different eras of things that infrastructure that populated the facilities. So the first thing we did, we worked on internally gathering all that information, getting it into a database. And at the time, we worked off of a Access database, customized. It worked for our small organization, populated it with the assets, and then integrated that to our CMMS work order system to kind of keep it current. Once again, small organization, that worked. Over time, we've kind of migrated to a more robust Lucid system that we captured all our assets. And once again, it served us well, but it was more focused for a small local government agency. My next stop was a much larger government agency for asset management. And we utilized systems from Mainstar was one of the first ones, and then migrated to Cartograph for our asset management work. So long story short, over the course of 35 years, I've had a lot of experience in different types of approaches to working the asset management journey, but also recognize that it's of vital importance that not only myself as a facility manager grasped and understood the importance, but also the team, the people assets that work within our organizations. They needed to understand how important it was for us to take that asset management seriously and how it benefited us as an organization for capital forecasting, for understanding life cycle considerations such that we were in less of a reactive mode, break fix, and more of a proactive approach to O&M maintenance to support our organizations. I know that's a mouthful and that's a lot of history, but I think it does speak to the fact that in general, asset management touches just about every industry and every business sector with some level of importance to kind of wrap your head around. Bear with me as I navigate my slides here. There we go. As I was talking about the journey. So I guess a couple key points, and once again, I like to kind of lay this out as an overview and we can drill down and get more granular in future sessions, but asset management key points. One of the things that stakeholders and leadership has to understand about asset management, it's not a one and done type of process. You have to have buy-in at all levels, including your operational staff, to be ready to go on this journey. It's a winding road. The different tools and mechanisms and viewpoints that your organization will have will kind of guide you along the path. But once again, I can't stress enough that you don't start it and stop it. It's evolving constantly. You need to look at, as I mentioned earlier, something about, we know infrastructure is important to capture, but not only that, the people assets. You know, I know it's kind of difficult to think of people as assets, or you know, it's kind of a cold way of looking at things, But one of the key things is that as we develop our programs within our organizations, the development of staff and transition and knowledge sharing becomes important as well, to support and grow those assets that are committed to helping you achieve your goals as a facility manager. So that's something I always like to toss in there. It's not just about the mechanical MEP systems and electrical and superstructure of your buildings. It's also about the people that make your mission come to life. And I think, yeah, that kind of caps off this slide. It's a cyclic process. You start it, you roll through it, you capture the asset data. And capturing asset data, that's, once again, I touched upon having folks go out in the field, our staff and part of PMs, they capture equipment data at different facilities. But in much larger environments, sometimes you have to rely on assessment assistance to pick up that information and capture that initial data to get into a asset management program, or conversely, in a module for your CMMS, an asset module for your CMMS. So I've used a number of different approaches. A few of the contracted resources, FEA was a great one. I put in a small stint as a assessor for Terracon, doing assessment of buildings and capturing that data to pass across to in a formatted and concise way to my customers. There's a great way of getting it all done in a short timeline, but then we as facility managers after that must ensure that we are the ones that kind of keep that data current by reporting against it and altering that data as we replace, as we capital renew, and as time goes on, that keeps, you don't have to do another assessment. Your systems will assist you in keeping it current. So yeah, once again, I touched upon what's an asset. Anything that's of value to the organization, infrastructure, people, processes are also assets, technology and information, and of course, finances can always be considered an asset. So yeah, the life cycle, as I spoke of earlier, it's an ongoing process. You do the analysis and you get the information in, you monitor and measure using the tools that you have acquired, whether it be spreadsheets or asset management programs or a combination of CMMS and asset management. And it allows you to plan and budget for future expenditures that are coming up. You can cycle through and report against various facilities within your portfolio. And through that reporting process, you're able to acquire the information you need to roll up to senior and executive level folks, financial and budgetary folks that hold the purse strings, and be able to forecast out considerably longer, or at least without as much, shall we say, manual manipulation of spreadsheets, through reporting that's very concise and meets the needs of your organization for getting ahead of the curve for your budget. So super effective, powerful tool. Yeah, it's served me well. So I guess with that being said, once again, recognizing that asset management is not a one and done. It's an investment of time and resources. It's ongoing. It's an iterative process. And it's just a fundamental change. If you haven't been doing asset management, it's a change in how you look at your infrastructure and how you come up with the data to support the investments that are going to happen. When you build it, it's gonna need some asset management. So with that being said, I think that kind of concludes my segment for the overview. And that leads us to Melissa and her discussion of asset management from her perspective.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And Josh, thank you for the introduction. Certainly excited to talk a little bit about this. I don't get asked to talk about facilities management all that often or talk to facilities management professionals, but hoping that I can offer a little bit of a perspective from maybe a different perspective than you guys are used to from property management side. So I'm going to start with a little background about myself. So I have been with CBRE for almost 17 years at this point. I started my career in Chicago in property management. So I had a multi-building portfolio that I managed for principal real estate investors out of Chicago. And had an opportunity about 4 years into my career, had a real passion for energy and sustainability, and had an opportunity internally with CBRE to help build an internal energy and sustainability consulting group. So I worked for almost a decade with our energy and sustainability consulting group doing working with buildings across the country. I did even some internationally as well, but buildings that we managed as a company and looking at their processes, their equipment, their daily operations, and really trying to help lead them in a direction where they could pursue some type of energy or sustainability certification. And we had several different programs that we worked with. So through that process, I got to see a number of different buildings across the country and globally. I got to work with and dive into multiple different building automation systems, energy management systems. I got to see different ways that we manage preventive maintenance. I got to see some really, really old equipment. I got to see some state-of-the-art technology. So it was really a good education for me just to be able to see how we as a company were doing this in so many different places with so many different asset types at varying ages and stages in their life cycle. So I stepped back into property management about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago now, took a position locally leading our property management group. So CBRE here in Kansas City has around 15 million square feet that we manage from a property management standpoint. That does not include facilities management, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. But we manage about 15 million square feet for third-party owners and institutional investors. I have a team of approximately 30 property management professionals, along with an additional 35 or so engineering and maintenance professionals that report in through me. So what people ask me a lot is, what is the difference between property management and facilities management? So CBRE as an organization has both. We do both facilities management as well as property management. And the number one difference, there are several differences. I think they're subtle, but I want to kind of talk about those differences and then also talk about where they're really the same. So the biggest difference I see is in ownership or usership of the property. That's really the differentiator between facilities management and property management. So on the property management side, we're serving the owner of the property who is really looking at it as a financial investment. They have purchased it to make money. That's their goal. On the facilities management side, this is generally the user of the property, and that user of the property can either be the owner or it could be a third-party owner. But for facilities management, we're typically serving the user, and we're really focused on operations for user comfort, user efficiency, and user functionality, which on the property management side is not necessarily something that we typically get into. On the property management side, we have multiple competing interests that are governed by those lease documents. So I have an owner that wants to make money. I have multiple tenants in the building that want to be comfortable and want to have a functioning office building. My team is responsible for ensuring that we're managing the client's expectations, that we are an investment manager looking out for their financial interest while also keeping our tenants happy. We really want to minimize risk for the owners while also making sure that they make or meet obligations to the people who are leasing space within their buildings. On the facilities management side, we're typically looking to minimize operational cost while maximizing user and guest experience. So it's just a slightly different focus. Property management, we're ensuring everybody meets the things that they're obligated to do per that lease. Facilities management, we're trying to make sure that the customer is taken care of and happy within their space. And property management, we can have small to large scale projects. So, we'll manage anything from a 60,000 square foot office building that's owned by a local family, to as big as, our large institutional investors that own millions and millions of square feet across the country and have master service agreements with us. So the Invescos of the world, the KBSs of the world, any of those real estate investment trusts. On the facilities management side, any single property could be small, but generally the accounts are very large. So we're covering facilities management for a company who's using space in multiple buildings and multiple locations. Now, on the property management side, one of the big things that is a challenge, particularly for us when it comes to asset management and our approach to asset management, is that properties exchange often between building owners. And I would say that's akin to, on the facilities management side, changing CEOs. So you're probably not going to see the CEO change 3 times in 2 years. If you do, that could be problematic. But on the property management side, we could see multiple owners. We could see a building change hands multiple times in a 2-year period. I remember in 2006, before the real estate market crashed, we had multiple buildings in Chicago that traded 3 times in a single year. So it's really becomes kind of like whiplash when you're trying to manage the assets appropriately, because every time ownership changes, you have a shift in priorities, a shift in approach, and oftentimes can be a shift in staff. The one thing between property management and facilities management that does not change, that is not different, is that our job is to make sure that all assets perform. And that requires that we're looking at equipment inventory, we're conducting preventive maintenance, we're troubleshooting for issues, and we're doing appropriate capital planning. And we have a lot of different ways that we can do that. Even internally at CBRE, we have different ways that we can approach that. And I'll talk a little bit about our approach. So from the moment that we take on a new property management assignment, our team starts working immediately to ensure that we identify every piece of equipment, we assess the condition of those pieces of equipment, we establish proper maintenance for every piece of equipment. So just like Bob said, you can't manage what you don't know you have. So there's a big part of this initially during a pre-transition phase where we go out and we do a large building equipment and tool inventory. We write down as much information as we possibly can about every single thing inside that building. Then we do a building acquisition audit. So as we come in to take over property management, we will go through and look at each of those pieces of equipment. We'll evaluate, we'll conduct a life cycle analysis. We'll look at its operating condition. We'll look at its point, how old it is, what the typical useful life of that equipment is, and kind of build a database. And I'm going to show you in the next slide when we get there a couple of different tools that we use to manage this process. But once we have collected all of the equipment and then we've assessed all of the equipment through that acquisition audit, that's when we really establish our PM system configuration. So we have a process for inputting all of that equipment into the PM program. We have some typical template PM schedules that we'll utilize. However, teams are capable and encouraged to really customize those. I mean, we have, as a large organization, we can say, okay, for this piece of equipment, here's the PM schedule that we recommend. However, we depend on our boots on the ground to really say whether or not that's appropriate for this particular piece of equipment, given any number of factors about its current operating condition. Sorry, Bob, you can go back.
I got a little ahead of you there.
That's okay.
I twitched on the key. Bear with me a second here.
No problem.
There we
So
go.
along with the PM schedule, we also determine team member assignments for different PM projects, for tenant work orders, and then we also determine escalations. So within any given team, if a certain type of work order is going to get assigned to one individual, we want to make sure if that individual happens to be out of the office on vacation that day, that we've got an escalation process in place to ensure that the work continues to get done. Within the first 90 days of any property transition, we complete our initial capital plan. So it's a very quick, it's a very draft. It is, based on what we've seen, here's what we think an owner could possibly experience. Now, that process gets much further defined as we go on, but that initial 90 days is really important for us to at least give the client an idea of what they can expect from a capital standpoint. And then as far as ongoing, just like Bob said, it's a cycle. So we establish what that equipment and tool inventory is. We establish the current condition. We plan for repairs and replacements. We manage those projects. And then ultimately we go back and we update our PM system and our inventories to make sure that the new equipment now rolls into that cycle and is properly maintained. All right, Bob, you can go ahead.
Okay.
All right, so here's just a couple of examples of the documents, and I apologize for the quality of pictures here. I wanted to give you guys an idea. The picture to the left is really part of what we do, is part of our initial audit that we'll do. For every single type of piece of equipment or asset you could possibly have in a building, we have built out one of these templates, and we go through and we get basic information about the equipment, the manufacturer, the serial number, typical operating parameters, where it's located in the building, any type of style number gets put in here. And then we have an inspection checklist. It's pretty basic. It's an okay, not okay, but it gives us that starting point that we need to understand where we're starting at. And, we have some pieces of equipment that are going to look pretty good. And we have others that we know right away, okay, we're going to have to put some time and energy into exploring this piece of equipment further on behalf of our client. The picture to the right is ultimately what we use when we get to the point we've done our inventory, we've done our initial assessments or that initial acquisition audit, and now we're ready to configure our PM system. So we take all of the information that we've collected about these assets and we put them into a very specific spreadsheet that uploads easily into the CMMS system that we typically utilize at CBRE, most often Angus. And you can go ahead to the next slide. So this picture is very small, but this is an example from, so Corporate Woods is a property where that CBRE does the property management on, and we built out as part of our takeover of that property in 2019, we built out the PM system in Angus. The majority of our property management projects use Angus. It's something we really try to encourage our owners to do. We have very few that still stay on any type of a manual program. We also use building engines. That's another big one in the world of property management. However, I think it depends on what you grew up on, and I grew up on Angus. So I like Angus, which means most of my team uses Angus. So it's really a lot of effort to set up. That initial setup can be very daunting as you collect all that information, especially again within the time frame that we operate in property management of getting it in there immediately and being ready to go and service that client on a very quick turnaround. So the setup is really challenging, but there's so much more capability and reporting options. And this becomes really important to me and to my teams as we're asking clients for resources, whether those resources are additional equipment, upgrades to equipment, or additional people. It's really easy for me to go in here and say, okay, if I have a team of 5 people, 5 engineers and maintenance technicians, And each one of those 5 is handling approximately 40 tenant work order requests a week and an additional 15 PMs per week. And I can track the amount of time that they're spending on that. I can see where we need additional resources to meet the needs of the client, to meet the needs of the building. I can also see if, based on the amount of time that it's taking our team to respond. So if I have a client who says, hey, tenant response times are really important to me, and I want you to be able to respond to a work order within 30 minutes, and I can show them, hey, look, because we don't have enough people, it's taking us 6 hours to respond. If we had an additional resource and identifying what that resource is, then we could meet your goals. We could meet your objectives and your expectations. So to be able to have this tool when talking to clients and to be able to pull the reports and to see the amount of time and to see where our resources are being spent is really valuable to me. I think our engineers and maintenance techs have come to love the mobile technology and photo attachment opportunities. So if you're doing a building inspection and you see something, you can take a quick picture of it and attach it to the work order that you create. Our property managers use that regularly to submit a work order to our building engineers. If you're in the middle of a PM and you see something, you can snap a picture of it and create a work order to be taken care of. So there are a lot of things that technology has allowed us to do that we haven't necessarily had the opportunity in the past, and it just keeps getting better. We can go to the next slide. However, we do still have some clients who don't necessarily want to move to an online or digital platform. And we do certainly still have manual PM programs that we can utilize for them. So again, this is a template that CBRE created. It's in Excel. It includes all of the equipment as well as any tasks related to that equipment and the annual schedule. So for example, here in the yellowish orange, you can see for fans over 5 horsepower in our pumps in a building, we've got, greasing as a task that we're going to do every 6 months. We can see based on the shading that we're supposed to do that in March and September. So that process is a little bit, it's easier to set up, it's easier to get started, but again, you lose out on the capability of tracking. We do, we'll use multiple tabs for multiple years. You can go back and hopefully see some trends on an annual basis. You'd sit down and review the equipment, update, discuss the tasks, discuss the timing, see if we need to do things more often or less often, and evaluate that over the course of multiple years and multiple years worth of tabs at the bottom. But so definitely something that we can still do, that we still do at some buildings. I've worked with several through energy and sustainability consulting that still utilize these systems, but we're more and more pushing toward the CMMS option. Okay, we can proceed. So then we get to capital planning. And really in our mind, from a property management standpoint, the capital plan encompasses several factors. So it includes obsolescence, condition of building systems and finishes, code compliance issues, as well as a long-term understanding of the investment strategy for the property. We always do a minimum 5-year capital plan that is in our global standards. So if you are a CBRE property management client, you are guaranteed a minimum 5-year capital plan from us that gets evaluated on an annual basis. That includes the initial capital plan that I mentioned that we do in the first 90 days at acquisition or at the start of the assignment. That's part of our transition program, as well as then an annual capital plan that's submitted as part of our annual budgeting process. So the way we approach capital planning is we start with data gathering. So that could be the property condition assessment, typically done at the time an owner purchases the property. Our transition assessments, that acquisition audit we do, life cycle analyses. And again, it's critical for us to understand our owner's investment goals for the property. Doesn't necessarily dictate what we put in our capital plan, but it's important for us to understand what their investment goals are. As we go to prepare the plan, we look at priorities. So we consider at CBRE Our priorities are regulatory and code compliance, fire, as well as potential loss of operational continuity. So those are the three priorities that we keep in mind as we're putting together or preparing to put together that plan. It is not our job to prioritize based upon our anticipated budgets or client approval. So our job is to determine what the property needs, what the assets need, and to present that information to our client. It's not our job to make decisions on their behalf. So we want to present them with all of the information they need to make decisions of their own. We also identify when outside resources are required. So for every item that we're going to put in a capital plan, we do what is called a total cost analysis. That would include all of the any type of engineering or consulting fees, any permits, any project management oversight fees, any contingency. It includes how long we think the project is going to take from beginning to end and some typical steps. So for every single capital project we present, we complete this total cost analysis. Again, we submit all of our recommended projects, regardless if we know that the client is going to reject some of them or push them off. We still submit all of them. The owner may choose to modify that capital plan. They may choose to reject. They may choose to delay. They may choose to escalate something based on their needs. Where we have an owner that rejects something or delays something that we consider high operational criticality, we have an internal escalation process. And I'll show you that in a minute, where I, as the director of property management, have access to capital plans for all of our managed buildings. And there's a process for when something gets rejected, because as a third party, we have some liability into the performance of the building. And we want to make sure that we're protected when we don't necessarily have control over these decisions. So the final step is plan execution. So once we have a scope that is finalized, we go through the competitive bidding process. We then submit to the client for final approval again. So regardless if they have approved our capital budget, once we are ready for that final approval, we submit the competitive bids along with a bid analysis. And again, that total cost analysis gets updated and submitted as well. We get that final approval. Then we update what is called cap tracks. So this is an internal CBRE program that we've created for property management specifically, where we can manage capital planning processes. And I'm going to show you guys a few examples of that in a minute. We also perform training on the new equipment. So anything that goes in gets trained. We do training. We record those trainings for planning for staff turnover. And then again, we go back and we update that PM plan and schedule for the new equipment that gets put in place. Sorry for the quality of these pictures. They came out a little bit blurry, but I wanted to show you, and I mean, I know there are outside platforms that do this. CBRE has invested significant money in technology over the past 10 to 15 years. And this is something where I don't want to say that we were missing, but we weren't doing as good of a job as we could for our clients. So the upper left-hand corner is an example of our project form. So for every project that gets entered into our capital plan, we submit a form that includes all of the information about it. We can attach that total cost analysis to it. We identify when we're recommending it be done to the client, whether or not it's been budgeted, if we have client approval. So it's really like the individual project details. The upper right-hand corner is our roll-up reporting. So this is what I was talking about as far as escalation. So me as the director of property management can go into cap tracks at any point, and I can see all of the capital projects that my team has planned. I can also pull it up, or I can export reports based on individual buildings. I can look at the approval status, whether or not a client has rejected something. And again, that escalation process. So if we have something that's considered high operational criticality, that's something that is placed into the project form, the upper left. We identify how critical that project is. And if the status gets changed to the client has rejected, I get an automated email telling me, hey, you need to go in and take a look at this. This could be a problem. So it's got a lot of fun reporting features for me. If you guys haven't figured out yet, I'm a bit of a data geek. I love looking at data. I love the story that it tells, or the multiple stories it tells. The final picture at the bottom then is sort of the output from this capital CapTrax program. So for any given building, I can print a 5-year capital plan and take a look at it. Again, the picture is very small, but this is a quick way for me to look on an annual basis at each individual building. If I pull this up and I know I've got a 30-year-old building that, you know, property manager Judy is overseeing, and I only see one item in her 5-year capital plan, I'm probably going to pick up the phone and have a conversation and say, okay, have you just already done everything, or are we not looking close enough? Because I guarantee you with a 30-year-old building, we've got more things in the next 5 years that need to be addressed. So it gives me some good insight into what they have going on. And again, it helps me plan resources. So I have a project manager that helps with any of our big major capital projects. And if I pull up the plan for 2022 and see that between all of our buildings, we're going to be doing $12 million worth of capital investment projects, I'm probably going to need to have somebody help support my team in those. So it helps me stay organized at a higher level. I think that is it for me and our process over here at CBRE. And I think next up is Nathan.
It is. So thanks. Appreciate it. Appreciate good information from Bob and Melissa. And I always know that whenever I sit on these things, whether I'm presenting or listening, I'm going to learn a lot. And so great information. It's always good to see how other people do it. And CBRE has always been someone that I've talked with and tried to learn from and about how they do it, because they are the world's largest folks out there when it comes to real estate and property management and facilities management. So very good information. Really liked your slide. I think it was slide 7 in there about the differentiation between property management and facilities management and how asset management ties in there. Lots of confusion about that in the world. And so it's always good to get out there and get that understood. So Josh, thanks for the intro. Again, I'm Nathan Guffey. I'm Vice President for Corporate Facilities and Corporate Real Estate here for Hallmark Cards and Crown Center. I think that, I don't know if this was mentioned, but early on in my career, I was a young engineer for a company called Clark Richardson and Biscuit. I worked there for a while, and that's where I really started to cut my teeth on building systems and really form an interest. And way back then, I even thought, wow, I sure would like to be the person who gets to take care of the equipment every day and own the equipment every day, figure out when we replace it, as opposed to just designing it and going on to the next project. Little did I know that I would be in the middle of what Hallmark and Crown Center, who have many of those types of systems, and I get to sweat those details all the time now. So also, before coming to Hallmark, I also served as a controls contractor, project manager for a company that's today called Siemens. Back then it was Landis and Gear Powers. But learned a tremendous amount about systems there. You know, one of the stories I always tell people is that, you know, it's one thing to be able to design and figure out what size pipe and what size pump and all of that other stuff. But until you figure out how you start it up and how you run it, all of that is almost of no value. So, but then I think Josh did a great job in my bio about what I've done at Hallmark and Crown Center. So I'll just jump into my materials. And I'll start off by telling you that I think that this has flowed really well. Bob had a very high level look at it. Melissa has done a great job of getting into some of the detail and about how CBRE would manage it from kind of the high end to maybe a little bit lower end. And I'm just going to show you kind of what we do in the story, right, wrong, or indifferent. This is how we do it. And before I do that, though, I'm just going to spend a little bit on this time on this slide just to call out the variety of assets that we have and the guests that we serve. So, we get right there in the middle on the bottom, we get to put up a 100-foot tall Christmas tree every year. With that comes all the drums and the toys that go out underneath it, and the nutcrackers and all of that other stuff. That's certainly probably a lot different than what other people do, but it's still asset management. And we got to take care of the tree. We got to get the tree in, we got to set it up, got to source the tree, all of those good things. And then you got to worry about the weather and what all happens to them, because so many people are coming down that this is going to be a part of their memory making for their families. And so, an example would be is that we had a big windstorm come through after we had everything set up, and the nutcrackers all got blown over and broken up. So we had to get out there and figure out how to replace those. Not the type of asset management most people think about, but it's still asset management, and we have to get out there. So other guests that we certainly have Hallmark Cards as being the corporate headquarters for the largest greeting card company in the world. But there's a lot of employees there. They have different expectations about what their experience should be every day. And our office and space planning group gets to deal with that. We have 2 large hotels. So we have, and I'll get into the specifics, but 2 large hotels in town that have a lot of business travel. They have a lot of airline travel. They have special events, whether it be football games and the referees are staying here, or the NFL staying here. Those folks, and then also just the staycationers that are coming from Omaha and Des Moines, those folks all have different needs and expectations whenever they come to the area. Our office buildings, certainly, I only have 2 of them pictured right here, but we certainly have 4 different office buildings that those folks have different expectations. And so trying to manage those assets and the variety of assets that we have with the variety and diversity of guests that we have is always a challenge, and we're usually always up for it. So, I also show in here in the far bottom left is our Snelson. It's our sculpture that we have in front of 2,600 grand. We also have a few pieces that are public art that are very expensive, and those things need maintenance every now and again, and that takes a special skill set and a special provider of those skills. So again, more diversity around what assets look like. So Bob, would you mind rotating the screen here for me? So just to give a little bit more detail about what our assets look like here, I tell everybody that we have 10 million square feet of structure. And so that means that we have 10 million square feet that's put together with concrete, rebar, and it's an interior space, if you will. That is outside the lawns that we have, the streets that we own, the sidewalks that we own, but 10 million square feet. 1.5 million of that's an office. When I say office, I mean the leased office space. 2.6 million is in corporate headquarters. 1.4 million square feet of hotels, 1,500, which includes the 1,500 hotel rooms, the banquet rooms, it's very large. We have 250,000 square feet of retail space, almost 3 million square feet of parking garage. That's incredible, with 10,000 parking spaces. So we have a lot of area that we're trying to maintain. And, I always tell people I'd hate to have to mop it. It's a lot of area. So our labor pool for internal labor at Hallmark headquarters, we have on staff our carpenters, our electricians, HVAC, plumbers, telecom people, custodians. Those are all Hallmark employees. At Crown Center, we use Kessinger Hunter for property management, and they have their own carpenters, electricians, HVAC, plumbers. Telecom, they really actually use the Hallmark, the landscaping and security. And then Crown Center as a business, so Crown Center Redevelopment, we have staff positions for subject matter experts around engineering disciplines, mechanical, electrical, structural. And then we have architects, designers that we have, industrial engineers that kind of help us with space. But that group right there is what I think does differentiate Crown Center and their approach with our asset management, if you will, or facilities management. And those folks also serve the enterprise. And as a consultant, I worked at a lot of places that had their own project managers, but I never worked for a tenant or a client that actually had the subject matter experts that they had that kind of directed, this is what I want you to do. And I do think that that does differentiate us because we have people living with this campus every day, 365 days a year. Those folks, as I said, are actually enterprise resources. So even though I didn't list the square footage and everything of our Lawrence facility out in Lawrence, our Leavenworth facility, and our Liberty distribution center, those folks also help out there in putting together the plans and how they go about managing the assets. Okay, next, Bob. Okay, so asset management for me kind of comes into, it kind of breaks down for me in capital planning and the preventive maintenance programs. 3 stages of capital planning. I've never read this anywhere, but this is just how I've interpreted it. And it kind of starts out in the beginning. You're replacing good with better and newer. So, you've got this new facility, you've got this, and it's like, well, this could have been a little bit better, or we could have done this a little bit differently, and let's go do that in our capital planning. And that's great. That's the best we can ever hope for. Then it kind of starts to move into, okay, now we're starting to address the must-dos and the some nice to haves. And so, what is it that we can do that is an improvement for the guest and the employee experience? But then these are the things that we're really going to have to do because they're old and, long in the tooth, and we're well beyond what their published life expectancy is. We need to do that. And then and I would say that that's squarely where we are. We've been here for 100 years. Some of these buildings, our new things are 20 years old, but that's where I'd say we were at. What I always am fear for love is whenever I meet others that are living in their reserve, their capital dollars and capital planning is all around the must-dos and the unexpected. And that is where you really get to, you're up late at night, you're worrying about what's going to happen whenever people come in and they flip the switch and it doesn't come on, or they can't occupy the building. So those are the ones that you're always trying to fight and stay completely away from. And I think that we do a good job of that here. There's always us that want to dream that we're going to get everything that we want, and we're going to get all new, office furniture and office chairs and all of that other stuff. But it's just always great to make sure that we're not in the reserve for the must-do and unexpected. So those are just Nathan's opinions about 3 stages of cap planning. But the priorities of projects are also something that's really important to me, and as I communicate to leadership. And I break it down very simply. It is about the serviceability and safety. These are the things we're going to go do. I referenced earlier, when people walk in the morning and they hit a light switch, I want them to be able to sorry, my phone ring, be able to, get to come into work. But, things like electrical feeders and things that, get out of our control sometimes that it's unexpected, they happen. And you've got to make sure that you're on top of those things and making sure you're talking about that at a high frequency and getting all the stakeholders in the room to make sure that we're all covered with that. The next one is exponential cost. So I don't know who all has to worry about parking lots and who has to worry about garages and things like that. But when it comes to concrete and parking lots and roofs to a certain extent, one thing that is that if it's going to cost you X dollars today to fix it, not only is the inflation tomorrow going to be there, but you're also going to have that the damage grew exponentially. So, the 2 foot by 2 foot problem that you had last year is now a 3 foot by 3 foot problem in the next year. So making sure that we're bringing those up and getting the dollars focused on that is my next priority. And then the employee and guest experience is my third. And love to say that was my first or second, but the reality is I have to make sure that those other 2 are met without question. and I'm doing the best that I can there. But the employee and guest experience, that goes to attraction and retention of employees. It comes to that the city brings in, that they're trying to, do the NFL draft, or they're trying to do World Cup, that when those people come and they tour, they see that this is a place that has great experiences for the people that are going to be coming. And that's very important to us, and always has to be something that we keep top of mind. Preventive maintenance and inspection, certainly, CMMS, cataloging assets, and, driving capital planning, scheduling labor, managing parts inventory, records, and repository of information, all very, very important to us. I'll talk a little bit about where we're at with that, and it's one of the areas that I'd like to see us improve, but I still think that we do a good job with that, with the tools that we have. So next slide, Bob. Okay, so our process. So capital planning, major repairs, I'll start there. We are Excel based, without question. We don't have a great database to pull from. We don't enter the information in the database. But the thing that I am proud of around our capital planning and major repair is that we have a very strong discipline about getting the stakeholders in the room and all of us talking about it. And when I talk about the stakeholders, we get about 15 to 18 people in the room talking about it, which is scary, I know. And sometimes it's a lot of herding cats, but I do think that we all work together as a team, and we have a great experience with that, because we're all talking about it. We're all hearing what's kind of bubbling up out of the conversations of where the priorities are. And again, this is one of those examples of where having in-house subject matter experts and our engineers and architects really comes to light. They're a very tight group, work very close together, and they all understand that, the structural requirement, or the mechanical requirement, or the electrical requirements are at a higher priority than some other discipline. So I am proud of that, to be very honest. It's not in a great tool in Excel, but I give us tons of credit for being very disciplined about meeting 3 times a year. We schedule those way out in the beginning of the year. We put all those on our calendars. Finance is one of those stakeholders that's in the room, so they hear the conversation firsthand. It's probably a finance manager or finance director, but they're in communication with our CFO. And we sit down with the CFO 2 times a year and say, this is what we see coming. This is where we need some extra money. And then annually, we sit down with the CEO, with the CFO in the room as well. And that actually just took place a couple weeks ago. So I feel very good about our discipline and our process. The tool might be better, but I'll take the discipline in our process that's documented over the tool in this situation. So around preventive maintenance and inspection, we could be better. We have a CMMS system that's obsolete, in my opinion. We still use it for scheduling our PMs. We have our parts inventory, we have our record retention and all of that. But we don't really get to do, have handhelds, and the technicians really are still having to take down information and then go back to a desktop and enter that, which there's always a lot lost in that trip from the 9th floor to the 3rd floor of what they remember to put in there. So that gets that's an area that I would love to see improve, but we always get caught up into the feeding of the beast. Melissa did say that it's very time consuming building that, and we are actually exploring that right now, of how we go about building that and what are the tools that we can make work in our best interest. But that's one that is still out there. Been talking about it a long time. Need to take some action on it. So managers perform a good deal of the project management of external contractors when we bring them in, and that is in our facilities management side. That's something that is helpful, but it's also, I always worry about how close they're able to manage, and it feels like that we're diluting their opportunity to stay on top of the PMs and so forth. But it's very helpful having them drive some of those projects with those external folks. So I think, okay, so capital equipment. So this here is just an example. And so you heard me talk about what my priorities are. serviceability, exponent over in the left column, serviceability, exponential cost, employee and guest facing, department and organizational request. And then we have just return on investment and energy and these targets. And so this here, it actually came directly out of a slide. I worked with the CEO and the CFO and my manager, the president of Crown Center with, and these are just representative of the fine print, if you will, or the non-bold, or just kind of gives them examples of the types of things that we view fit into those buckets. This comes off of a very, very granular Excel table that we all pour over line by line and develop what these costs are. But this is how we communicate. Again, I'm always pushing that I need to make sure that the building is serviceable, and whether that be through HVAC or electrical or elevators or fire security, building management, those are the things that I have to have that we need the dollars for. So serviceability, I always, I hate to say it, but sometimes you have to kind of startle people with, how severe things go. But our Sheraton Hotel, a 40-year-old transformer, it blew in an electrical inspection. Right now, supply chain is not good, right? So that took about 20 weeks, I think, 16 to 20 weeks of delivery cycle for that gear to show back up. If we hadn't had a transformer through Evergy available, that would have been a really difficult time for our hotel. It happened to work out. We've got times whenever we have operational flow orders on gas, and we had it last year. Well, we had boilers that were not set up in the outside plants for fuel oil, hadn't been maintained. Those are the types of things that, I'm always pushing on about serviceability and making sure that all of that equipment is capable of operating whenever we need it. So I think you can flip the slide, Bob, and I think that we're up for Q&A next, isn't it? Before we get into that, I just want to thank Melissa. She volunteered her time and her expertise on this. She's outside of the group, but I always go to my friends at CBRE and I ask a lot of questions. And so they're always been a great resource. And so whenever we said we were looking for this, I said, how about I reach out and see if I can't meet a new CBRE person in Melissa, and really, really did appreciate your information today. So thank you for joining and sharing with us today.
Absolutely. Appreciate the invite.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. That was amazing. It amazes me how much I learn from you guys every day, and I don't do what you do. So thank you for filling my cup of knowledge. I have a couple of really good ones that we have to share with you guys. What are some of the most unique assets that you manage? I know that Nathan talked about that really great sculpture that he's responsible for, but we'd like to hear more.
Well, I guess I'll hop in here from a unique perspective. It's hard for me to quantify unique because I've seen so many things over the years. It's like, well, that's kind of a perspective thing, but of late, as really keenly interesting is all the varieties of sewage ejection pumps and the outmoded pump systems of which are currently in place for retrofit to something new. So that kind of stuck in my mind. Not really super. I guess it would be unique if you don't work with such things, but that's what hops right out at me.
That's definitely a facility manager dyed in the wool right there. If a sewage ejector, man, man, you are not going to be big at parties.
No. And miraculously enough, I'm really not, Nathan. So
I bet you are. I'm just kidding you. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just it's just the world we live in and the things that that are on a person's mind. For me, what are my high risk elements, and where if something fails, would I need to react quickly and proactively, have the research in place? So that's kind of how I funnel to unique.
Okay.
Melissa, what about you?
I was thinking about that, and I kind of feel like I'm in the same boat. I've seen so many weird things over my career. It's hard to know what would be considered unique. I would say some recent experience with detention and retention ponds, and the type of equipment that goes into maintaining those, particularly when you get city runoff, has been interesting recently. As well as I have a building with really old, unique elevators that run essentially on car batteries. So yeah, that's fun. Those would probably be my recent examples.
Well, and I'll just throw out, the reason I put the question out there is because we just did finish a renovation and refurbishment on the Snelson. I don't know who had driven by, but it's been almost 2 years ago that we found that it had broken. And so we had to take it down, and that was a fiasco, and tubes were bent and everything. And you know, I don't know if you spend much time looking at it, but it's probably more engineering than it is actually art. It's just, you know, how do you put it up there? So it's one thing to drive by and just be, hey, that's really cool. But if you stop and think about, well, how'd you put it up? You know, what piece went first? That was a very interesting one. But I would tell you that we have a couple sculptures. One is the Calder that sits out at Pershing and Grand, several $1 million. I mean, these sculptures are very expensive. And, you know, it's funny that whenever you start doing things, you know, you just look at that and go, well, that's just orange. Well, no, that's not just orange. That's a Calder orange. And the Calder Foundation is very picky about what color orange you put on it. So, you know, you just don't send the landscape crew out there with a can of orange fluorescent and go out there and start spray painting. And so it's about, you get a great experience of dealing with these people and these foundations that still have strong opinions about how things will be maintained going on into the future. So anyway, I threw that out there just for that.
We have a fun building lighting display at the Darth Vader building at College of Metcalf, if you guys are familiar with that one.
Yep.
So that it was a very, very old system that we just updated last year. So we now have like touch screen capabilities and can program. So it all came from one of the tenants in the building wanted to be able to program their logo into this light display on the side of the building. So they put forth some money to help make that happen. And we got a very nice upgraded lighting system out of it, which is also kind of fun.
Can I make a quick
Great
comment to Nathan's point, Rose?
Yeah, go ahead, Jenny.
So Nathan said something about it's really more about engineering than the actual color and the art. And I wanted to share for all the nerds out there. I follow a person from Train Technologies. Her name is Candace Cohen, and she just posted either yesterday or this morning a photo of the Empire State Building, but from an engineering perspective. So any nerds that want to go out and look at the engineering side of the Eiffel Tower, her name is Candace Cohen. And because at the time of it, I just thought I would share that.
That's fun.
Thank you.
Nathan, we had a specific question for you, which is, do you have any experience or guidance for connecting the lowest tier of CAP planning to the negative impact on guest experience? No, it's
So it's a good, so I'm going to try it if I understand the question correctly. So I would tell you that I usually end up having to defer to the folks that run hotels, that manage our events from a guest experience of how we get attention towards those dollars. And there's no question about it. The guest experience, you know, the one thing that we do spend a lot of money on are hotels, and it's because of that experience. The employee one, I lean towards HR and staffing, and to some degree, public affairs as far as headquarters go. And, you know, just trying to have them help me understand. So where's the barometer on attraction, retention? What are the things that we need to start targeting? I think I saw Melanie on the call, but you know, it's one of those things that we have to be careful though, because sometimes our partners that I'm actually using for the barometer want to jump in and start helping us. And I always have to make sure that I tell the CEO and everyone else, we know what to do once you tell us what you want. This is an area of concern. So I don't know if I answered that question correctly or not, Tiffany, but if not, don't hesitate to clarify for me.
No, I think you did pretty well. I'm always interested in how you help the decision makers around the prioritizing investments understand that if we go down to that, well, when it breaks, let me know and I'll give you some money approach, it is directly tied to that employee retention, recruitment, and experience. In my background, I don't have a lot of guest environments, but I equate them to employees.
Sure.
If you want long-term career folks, they have to have a positive experience. And sometimes, particularly if it's an environment that's already sort of dropped to that lowest tier and feels like that's the baseline, helping them understand that those investments need to get bigger faster if they want to improve that experience component.
Yeah.
So just curious if you had some insight.
Well, and just to make matters even a little bit more difficult is that I view that headquarters is trying to figure out where it wants to go. We were perfectly fine being almost a fine art museum with an amazing diverse art collection that was on display for people to see. We believed in that we needed to be inspired by external art, and right now, you know, the trend is really starting to be more about branding and to be about a corporate brand and splashing that throughout the headquarters. And so, yes, that even makes it even more difficult with that question, Tiffany. So, yeah, good question.
Josh had one for us. Which component or function of your specific CMMS systems are absolute must-haves? What makes the systems you chose worthwhile?
Well, I think I could chime in on that and then a follow up from other panelists. For me, it's once again, it's the CMMS system is the tool of which we have to use in order to make everything work. But it's the tool, the processes and the people are what dictate how successful that tool are. I've seen so many CMMS systems that have the functionality that is all similar, but yet different fails have occurred because of not using it properly or consistently. But I guess if you were to pick one in a CMMS system that is important to me is the level of call status of which can be recorded and reflected easily by technical staff and then reported on against for KPI measures that is typically set up by the customer and the provider of the software at the initiation of the CMMS. So that would be mine. Call status, close status, and reporting granularity that you can filter in and report against.
Yeah, I would second that. I think if I was going to say which function is most important to me, it would be reporting, which is probably going to be a little bit different answer than if I was on the boots on the ground using it on a daily basis. So the other thing that's really important to me, which isn't necessarily a function, is being user friendly and easy to train. Because as Bob said, if it's not utilized correctly, it's not worth it. It has no value. So being able to take all of my maintenance techs and engineers and ensure that they understand how to use it and that it's simple for them, that they actually want to use it, is really important.
So
Agreed.
I think I'm a data guy too. But one of the things that I would say, just because I do want to speak for the folks who manage the team that's doing it, is that I do think that the important piece is that we have the PMs in there, we have the feedback that we know that those were completed. Just because there are so many people running around all this square footage, and that, you know, a manager, it's really difficult for a manager to really be able to put their eyes on every single thing to follow up on. So just for me, I'd love to have the reporting. We have the reporting coming at us a little bit differently that we can sort and try to find the high frequency calls. But I actually like it from a management perspective as well, just because it's very difficult to have to understand where the people are working and what is getting actually done.
Great. I have one that this might be a two-parter, but what part of the asset management process do you wish your organization could improve?
Mine's work order management, period. I mean, I just wish that's the area where we've got some opportunity and we're working on some things, but that's absolutely where I want it to be. And then the preventive maintenance goes along with that.
I think our organization could improve on ensuring that, you know, what we have established, what we've created, makes it all the way down to every level. I think sometimes there's, because we are so large, that there can be a disconnect between what we say we're going to do for our clients and maybe what gets done. And so sometimes I feel like we need to do a better job of bridging that gap.
I think for me, historically, the one area that I always wanted to do better on and was a struggle is the addition of capital assets to the portfolio. Traditionally, the organizations that I'd worked with had a hard time capturing the new asset information as they added things to the portfolio. And then later they were trying to go back and struggling with incorporating that into what had been a pretty tight asset management system. Quite similar to that, speaking to that, I would add contractual clauses at the build of capital projects to assist in making it a requirement for contracted resources to provide asset information that we could pull across into our CMMS system as we were adding properties. So that was always one of the areas that confounded me. Well, the building's a year old, but where's the asset data?
I think you guys answered the second part, which was it a tool or a communication issue with the piece you wanted to improve. So I think you guys answered that. I think I just had one extra one in the list you guys provided, and that is, what business partner relationship presents the biggest opportunity with regard to asset management? Is it finance, IT, operations? You guys can flesh that one out.
I feel it's a combination of all of the above, because without one component, without complete team buy-in, your chances of being successful or your chances of hitting a major bump in the road grow exponentially without the team agreeing.
I agree. I don't think I could pick a most important.
The only thing I am going to pick a relationship. I feel good about our finance one. You know, hey, I'm always going to want more money than they want to give me. There's no question about that, but they're in the room. I get to talk to them. They hear me. And so I can't ask for more than that. But I will tell you that the area that I probably have the biggest issue around are some of the information systems that are required to operate our buildings and our properties. And right now, and for the last few years, we've certainly had the IS and the IT conflict to figure out how we put these systems on the network. You know, these are typically vendor managed or third party managed sometimes, and having that on our backbone for the business backbone is a no-go. But actually having those folks figure out how they want to do that so that I can run my technology that is for access control and cameras and building management and all of that in a way that is useful to me. That is my biggest problem right now. But I don't think I'm alone. I think that there's a lot of folks out there that have an ITIS need to go to the top of the mountain meeting. But it's one of those issues that really does stress me a little bit.
Hey everybody, this is Sam. I don't like typing. I'm a horrible typer, so I can speak a lot, talk a lot better. Melissa, Nathan, Robert, you guys did a fantastic job. Josh, great program. You know, when I saw asset management, it made me think of a longtime KCFMA member. The guy's name was Ken Fancoli, and they used to have an asset management business where they'd come in and put barcodes on all of our stuff. And and I pictured asset management. For some reason, that was what came to my mind. And this program has far exceeded my expectations. The comparison between property management and facility managers and the different ways people use either CMMS or building management systems, or some of us are still using Excel spreadsheets and building them individually. It's all been extremely interesting and informative to me. Like Rose said, I mean, one of the things I try to do is learn something every day, and I learned a lot of things today, and I just wanted to say, I think you guys did a tremendous job. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam.
I think that is the last of our questions and comments.
Looks like Julie is that a hand up there, or is that a?
I think it's an applause. We'll assume it's an
Thank you.
applause, Bob.
Thank you. I had to get a little closer to the screen.
Yeah, that was definitely an applause. Excellent, excellent program. Really appreciate Bob and Melissa and Nathan taking time out of their day, and not just today, but it took some time to put this presentation together. So we really appreciate the quality information that we're delivering to our members. So again, applause and much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I think that is the end of our meeting. You get 4 minutes till your next one.
Yay.
Use it all in
Are you
one
looking
place.
at my calendar? Thank you,
Don't
guys.
tell anybody you have 4 minutes.
That's right.
All
Bye.
right, thanks
Take care,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Great job, everyone.
Thank you.